Hi, and welcome to Anne's Family Recipe. Today we're making Italian wedding soup. This recipe for Italian wedding soup comes from my mother-in-law. Now, we kind of joke around about this because my mother-in-law never makes the same dish twice. She's an amazing cook, but it's really hard to nail down exactly what her recipe is. So I texted her, I called her, and she gave me kind of the framework for how to create her wedding soup. Now, just so you know, there's a bunch of different versions of wedding soup out there. This is kind of the common wedding soup that you're gonna find in Western Pennsylvania, where I'm from. So here we go. I'm starting with my super large stock pot here on my stove, and I have about 5 chicken thighs. They're bone in, skin on, and I covered them by about like 2 or 3 inches with cold water. So this is coming up to a boil right now, and then we're gonna simmer this for about 2 hours or so to make our own chicken stock. Plus we're gonna use the meat off of the chicken thighs as part of the meat along with some homemade meatballs in our soup. Now to flavor this, I have a whole bunch of things behind me. So I have a couple of onions. Now mine were super small, so I'm using 2 here that I just peeled and cut in half. So I'm gonna pop those into my broth for nice flavor. And then I just had some baby carrots on hand. Of course you can use regular sized carrots, just peel them and chop them up roughly. Honestly, you don't even need to peel them, just scrub them so they're clean and then chop them up. So the carrots are in, and next I'm adding 2 bay leaves, just dried. Oh, there's an extra carrot. And then I have 4 garlic cloves here that I just crushed. I used the back of a drinking glass and I crushed them and the skin comes right off. You don't need to chop them up. And that gives really good flavor to our broth. And for once, I have fresh parsley on hand. So I grabbed a bunch, washed it up, and I'm gonna throw that in. And then lastly, I'm adding a generous amount of salt and pepper. Now this is totally to taste. I'm probably gonna start with like 2 or 3 teaspoons. And maybe add more because again, we're just starting with water and then building the flavor of our stock. You can also use like a chicken bouillon base and that'll add a lot more saltiness. So then you want to kind of adjust as needed. So there's like probably about 3 teaspoons there, and then some black pepper. Now, other things that you can add, but I'm not going to today, are celery. I hate celery, so that's not going in, but you can always add a couple of stalks just for a little extra flavor. That's very common. Something else you can add, I just don't have it in my pantry right now, is turmeric, and that'll give your broth a really nice golden color. So I'm just gonna let this broth come to a boil and then reduce it to a simmer and let it cook for about 2 hours. And our chicken thigh meat is gonna get really tender, like fall off the bone tender, and our broth is gonna be nice and flavorful. And then we'll add in our greens and our homemade meatballs, and it's gonna be delicious. The broth for my wedding soup has been simmering for a good 2 hours now. So the next step is to strain out everything that's inside of here, and then we're gonna add some more ingredients to our broth. So I'm using this spider strainer. I love having this. It is super handy. I use this when I'm making my spaghetti sauce. You can fish out anything from anywhere. So we're just taking out all the veggies, the chicken thighs. I'm just transferring it to this rimmed baking tray that I have right here on the stove. And by spreading the chicken thighs out on this tray, it's gonna allow them to cool a little bit quicker so that we can handle them and pull the meat off of the bones. And next, this is totally optional, but I am gonna skim a little bit of the fat off of the top, just so that the broth doesn't quite have like as oily of a consistency. My broth is still simmering, so next I'm gonna add in my greens. Now this is a bag of escarole, which looks just like a head of regular like red leaf lettuce. And this is a tip I have for any salad greens that you're preparing in advance. I bought these several days ago, and as soon as I got home from the store, I washed them. I rinsed them really, really thoroughly a few times, and I actually used my salad spinner to wring out all the liquid. And then I chopped them up and put them in this Ziploc bag with a paper towel that I changed out every day. And that helps draw any excess liquid out of them, and it keeps them super fresh. These, I didn't buy these recently, and they're nice and crisp and crunchy still and bright green. So these are gonna go into our broth. They have to simmer for at least an hour. They're slightly bitter, and a little bit of that bitterness is gonna go away as they cook. So this is escarole, a traditional green that you would use in wedding soup. I'm also gonna add a bag of baby spinach, just to kind of beef up the greens. If you're following me on Instagram at Anne's Family Recipe, you might know that this weekend I bought a donut pan and I've been making donuts for breakfast every morning. So I feel really good about the fact that I'm adding not 1, but 2 bags of greens into my dinner tonight. Now this may look like a lot of greens, but they're gonna wilt down a lot. So don't be worried that your leaves are all the way up to the top. In just a couple of minutes, we'll mix them in and they'll be all wilted. Now I'm also adding in a couple of carrots that I diced up. I'm not sure if this is a traditional ingredient, but it's traditional in my mother-in-law's recipe. And they're really good. They add that little bit of sweetness and another extra veggie into your soup. The last ingredient I'm gonna add at this phase is homemade meatballs. Now I made these a couple days ago, so I'll show you how I made them. This is my mother-in-law's recipe, and I used about 2.5 pounds of meat. So there's a lot of meat here, but I was using half for the Italian wedding soup and then half for spaghetti and meatballs for dinner that night. So you'll see that some of them are mini and some of them are normal size. Now this is 80-20 meat, so 80% lean, 20% fat. My mother-in-law's recipe is just a ratio, really. For every pound of ground meat, you just use 1/2 cup of Italian seasoned breadcrumbs, 1/2 cup of Parmesan cheese, and 1 egg. So I used 2 eggs, a cup of parm, and a cup of seasoned breadcrumbs for a little over 2 pounds of ground meat. Then I seasoned it up with salt and pepper and garlic powder, which is kind of to taste. Of course, there's already seasoning in the breadcrumbs, and the parm is a little bit salty, so that's kind of up to you. Now I mixed this all together by hand, along with the 2 eggs. I'm not sure if I mentioned that, but I threw the 2 eggs in there too. Mix it all together by hand, and then I used my small cookie scoop to measure out even amounts of the meat mixture, and then I used my hands to smooth out the balls and make them nice and even. I placed my meatballs on a cookie sheet that I lined with aluminum foil, and I sprayed it with some baking spray so that they wouldn't stick. And then these are really quick and easy to make. They only take about 10 to 12 minutes in the oven. I had it preheated to 350 degrees, and then I allowed them to cool, and I just put them in Tupperware and back into my fridge until I needed them today. My Italian wedding soup has finished simmering for the afternoon. I wanted to mention that I added at least an additional tablespoon of salt. You just have to taste it as you go. It's so funny because I was recently watching one of my old videos that I filmed last year where I made chicken corn chowder, and at the time I was pregnant. I put the tiniest amount of salt in there because I was so sensitive to a salty flavor. Eating it now, I would have thought it was super bland. So it really depends on your taste buds. So just taste it as you go and salt it a little bit here and there until it's to your liking. So now I get to give this amazing smelling soup a taste. Hopefully it stacks up to my mother-in-law's recipe. Let's see, we'll get a little bit of everything here. Oh wow. That's really good. It's incredible how flavorful a broth can be when you just throw in a couple of chicken thighs and a little bit of seasonings, and it has been cooking all day. I was gonna say it tastes like it's been cooking all day, and it has. It's a bit of a labor of love, but oh my gosh, that is so good. This is perfect for like a rainy day or a cold winter day. Wow, okay, I need another bite. I'm gonna get a little meatball on this one. A little bit savory there too. And you know what? You can put a little bit of grated Parmesan cheese on top of this for a little extra salty bite. My mother-in-law also gave me a tip that to finish the soup off, you can add about 1/3 of a stick of butter at the end. She said that's her catering friend's tip. Well, I think I've done my mother-in-law proud with this version of her Italian wedding soup. Thank you so much for joining me in my kitchen. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and follow me on Instagram at Anne's Family Recipe. And I'll see you again soon for another family recipe. For the full recipe, check the description box below. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Thanks for joining me in my kitchen.